Welcome to Wall with Sandwire. Today, we're talking about Wan Saiful's criticisms of the recent U.S. presidential welcome and the wider implications for the current administration. Okay, so let's get straight into it. We saw this specific moment, a diplomatic ceremony, really blow up quite quickly into a national discussion, didn't it?
Absolutely. When U.S. President Trump arrived, the way Prime Minister Dato Seri Anwar Ibrahim handled the welcome, the enthusiasm, the singing and dancing, it triggered a pretty immediate and, well, sharp reaction.
And this wasn't just some minor grumbling, right?
Yeah.
This was actually brought up on the floor of Parliament.
Exactly. And what's interesting is how it was raised. Tas Gilugor, Member of Parliament, Wan Saiful, he was the main voice here.
Yeah.
And he didn't just issue a statement, Ada. He brought these criticisms right into the middle of the annual budget debate.
Okay. So linking it directly to the government's core financial and policy plans.
Precisely. It felt quite strategic. He basically used that platform to challenge the government on, well, three different fronts. You had the high-level diplomacy angle, then the sort of day-to-day running of the communication ministry, and finally some really specific points about the budget itself, things missing regarding public health and tax policy.
Right. A broad critique, then. Let's start where the controversy really cooked off, the actual welcome ceremony.
Sure.
Wan Saiful's main complaint, as I understand it, wasn't about being unwelcoming, but that the whole thing was overly exaggerated.
Yes, overly exaggerated and excessive. Those were his words. The argument wasn't about basic hospitality. It was about the level of enthusiasm. He felt it just went, well, way beyond what was necessary or appropriate.
And what was the reasoning behind that?
Diplomatically speaking.
His point centered on maintaining Malaysia's dignity and, a kind of movered stance. The idea is, yes, be welcoming, absolutely, but maybe aim for a more moderate reception, especially when dealing with world leaders who might be seen as, let's say, controversial figures internationally. He felt the enthusiasm should reflect Malaysia's kind of balanced approach.
That seems to be the gist of it. Not overwhelming excitement, but a more composed welcome.
And this is where it got quite pointed geopolitically. He connected the welcome to the situation in Gaza, didn't he?
He did, very directly. He basically said, look, the whole world is condemning Trump over the genocide in Gaza, yet here's our prime minister enthusiastically greeting him at the airport, even singing and dancing. That's a very strong statement to make in Parliament.
Wow. So linking a ceremonial gesture directly to a major international crisis and accusations of genocide.
Exactly. And Wan Saiful's conclusion from this was pretty stark. He questioned the logic, the benefit of such a, well, grand welcome for someone facing that kind of global condemnation.
He basically said it brings shame to the nation.
Explicitly, he said this action will only bring shame to Malaysia. So in his view, it showed poor judgment, maybe a lack of sensitivity to the global mood, a diplomatic failure, essentially.
Okay, so if the diplomacy side raised concerns about potential shame, did the criticism then shift towards how things are actually run, the administrative side?
Yes. That was the next logical step in his argument. If the top-level judgment is being questioned, it opens the door to scrutinize the machinery behind it. And that's where the communication ministry came into focus.
Right. The ministry responsible for, well, communication, but also things like digital infrastructure. What were the specific failures Wan Saiful pointed out there?
He highlighted two main areas. First, it was about sort of basic competence and avoiding simple errors. He urged the ministry, quote, do not repeat past mistakes, and specifically mentioned the embarrassment for mispronouncing the names of visiting foreign leaders.
Okay, maybe sounds small, but those things can look bad, right?
That was his point. He argued it exposes our weaknesses to the world,
Yeah.
Makes the country look, unprepared or unprofessional.
A lack of attention to detail, perhaps. What was the second, probably bigger issue he raised?
The second was much broader, yeah. It was a critique of the ministry's performance in driving national digital transformation. And this wasn't just about bureaucratic processes. He tied it to real-world problems.
Like what specifically?
He mentioned unstable internet access in certain areas, how that directly affects students trying to learn online or small businesses trying to operate in this digital age. His point was, if the ministry in charge of communications can't ensure reliable internet, what are they focusing on?
That hits home for a lot of people, I imagine. And did he connect this to sort of the ministry's overall role?
He did. He wrapped up that part with a pretty strong political demand. He basically called on the ministry to focus more on promoting freedom of speech and transparency instead of acting, in his words, as a government propaganda tool that tries to shut down dissenting voices. That's a direct challenge to how the ministry operates and what its priorities should be.
Right, questioning whether it's serving the public or just the government's image. That's a fundamental point about open debate.
It really is. It taps into that deeper concern about whether government bodies are facilitating dialogue or controlling the narrative.
Okay, so we've gone from the diplomatic welcome to administrative competence, or incompetence, according to Wan Saiful. Now, the third area, the budget. This seems quite different, getting into specific tax policy.
Yes, and this is where he pointed to what he framed as a major policy contradiction, specifically around e-cigarettes or vaping.
Vaping tax. How did that come up in the budget debate?
Well, Wan Saiful noted that any mention of an e-cigarette tax was completely missing from the upcoming budget announcement, just absent.
Okay. But wasn't there talk about increasing taxes on vaping for health reasons?
Exactly. That's the contradiction he jumped on. He reminded everyone that the Ministry of Health itself had previously proposed a huge tax increase, a really massive one.
How big are we talking?
They wanted to raise it from the current 40 cent per milliliter, which is, less than half a ringgit, all the way up to 4 ringgit per milliliter, RM 4.0 per MLO.
Now, a tenfold increase. That's significant.
Hugely significant. And the stated reason was public health, obviously trying to make vaping products much less affordable, especially for young people.
So the health ministry proposes this big hike for health reasons, and then nothing in the budget.
Precisely. And Wan Saiful basically asked, what happened? Does this point to a serious policy conflict between different government departments? Or did the health argument somehow get overridden behind the scenes?
It certainly raises questions about policy coherence, doesn't it? If one ministry pushes hard on health, and then the budget seems to ignore it.
That's the implication he was drawing. And importantly, he didn't just point out the problem. He actually proposed a specific fix.
Oh, what did he suggest?
He suggested the government should immediately implement a minimum price for e-cigarettes, a floor price.
So even without the big tax hike, they couldn't be sold super cheaply.
Exactly, to prevent them being easily accessible, particularly to younger consumers. And he got very specific with the numbers, too.
What price level did he suggest?
He proposed setting a minimum price somewhere between 6 ringgit, RM 6.00, and 6 ringgit and 25 cent, RM 6.25 per milliliter.
Okay, that's quite detailed. It shows he wasn't just criticizing vaguely, he had a concrete alternative policy in mind.
Right. It adds weight to the critique, suggesting they've actually thought through alternatives, not just complaining.
So let's try and pull these threads together. We have the criticism about the presidential welcome being excessive, then the communication ministry's alleged failures on protocol and digital access, and finally this vaping tax omission in the budget. Why bundle all these together in one speech during the budget debate?
Well, politically, it looks like an attempt to paint a bigger picture, doesn't it? It's not just about one mistake here or there. By hitting these 3 different areas, diplomacy, administration, and policy coherence, Wan Saiful seems to be building a case that maybe the administration lacks, a clear, unified direction.
Suggesting a disconnect between different parts of the government, or maybe between stated goals and actual execution?
I think that's exactly the narrative being pushed. The welcome suggests flawed judgment internationally. The ministry issues suggest problems with basic competence domestically. And the budget omission suggests internal policy conflicts or a failure to follow through on key priorities like public health.
So the overall message is perhaps one of inconsistency, or maybe a lack of strong, cohesive leadership.
That seems to be the underlying critique Wan Saiful is trying to land. Bundling these points makes the criticism seem more systemic, rather than just isolated incidents. It forces you, the listener, to ask if the government really has a firm grip on things across the board.
It's definitely a multi-pronged attack on the administration's performance. So thinking about this for you, our listeners, do these points that Wan Saiful raised, from a dance at an airport arrival to internet speeds to a specific tax rate for vape juice, do they suggest a genuine lack of coordinated strategy in the current government?
Or, alternatively, are these perhaps just the kinds of issues any government, especially maybe a coalition, faces? The normal friction and occasional missteps of governing, which an effective opposition will always highlight.
Something to think about as we watch how the administration responds and how these political debates continue. Remember to like and subscribe for more videos like this.